She mistook the millionaire CEO for her blind date, and one simple night became impossible to forget. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Ava Stewart stood by the narrow window of her modest apartment, gazing out at Philadelphia's skyline. Jagged silhouettes of buildings rose into an evening sky, tinted with oranges and pinks, creating a view both exhilarating and intimidating. She had moved here just a few weeks prior, armed with an unwavering passion for her new role as coordinator of community engagement at the Philadelphia Heritage Collective. Yet under the glow of city lights, a subtle ache of loneliness formed, reminding her that she still knew so little about the place she now called home. Clutching a mug of herbal tea, Ava inhaled deeply, trying to calm the persistent flutter in her chest. The city's vibrant hum seemed both welcoming and alien. 2 unpacked boxes sat in a corner, a testament to how she'd been too consumed by work to fully settle in. Old framed photographs peeked out from the top of one box, revealing her past life in a smaller Pennsylvania town, memories of simpler times and bittersweet relationships. Her reflection in the glass, soft brown hair skimming her shoulders, a quiet but thoughtful demeanor, looked back with a guarded hope. Ava's phone buzzed on the kitchen table, jolting her from her reverie. It was Chloe Bennett, her closest friend since college. Having moved to Philly a few years before Ava, Chloe had been urging her to embrace the city's social scene. "You can't live by historical plaques and office deadlines alone," Chloe often teased. Though Chloe lived only a few subway stops away, their busy schedules had kept them mostly in touch by texts and late-night calls. Ava appreciated Chloe's spirited personality, an adventurous counterpoint to her own timidity. Pressing the phone to her ear, Ava listened to Chloe's animated greeting. "How's my favorite city newbie doing? Don't tell me you're working late again. You have to experience Philly in all its midnight glory." Rolling her eyes but smiling, Ava admitted she was home, sipping tea and trying to decompress. Chloe's exaggerated sigh resonated through the line. "Ava, you have to get out of that cocoon." "Trust me, there's more to life than spreadsheets and press releases." Ava leaned against the kitchen counter, feeling a slight tug of guilt. She had promised herself she'd try to socialize more, but the reality of starting fresh in a metropolis, far larger than anywhere she'd lived before, had her retreating into caution. "I know," she replied softly. "I've just been so focused on the new role. My boss wants me to plan outreach programs to strengthen neighborhood ties. It's thrilling, but I'm swamped." Chloe's voice turned gentler. "I'm proud of you, you're doing important work preserving the heart of this city. But you can't shut yourself off. Ava, you need to let people in." And that was the crux of her solitude, letting people in. Past heartbreaks had made Ava wary of superficial connections. She'd rather invest her energy in meaningful bonds, yet genuine friendships and certainly love seemed hard to spark in a bustling urban environment. Still, the conversation with Chloe lifted Ava's spirits. As they continued chatting, Chloe worked her persuasive magic. "I have the perfect idea. Let me set you up on a blind date." Ava's initial response was a firm refusal. She pictured the awkward silences and forced smiles. But Chloe's enthusiasm was contagious, and after some coaxing, Ava reluctantly agreed to hear more details later. Ending the call, Ava exhaled, setting the phone aside. The swirling anxiety in her stomach was now tempered by a small flicker of curiosity. Maybe Chloe was right. Maybe it was time to balance her dedication to community projects with a personal life she'd been too quick to sideline. She sipped her tea, imagining how it would feel to connect with someone in this sprawling city. Outside, the sky deepened from pink to purple, then to a velvety blue. The towering buildings, tinged by lights from 100 offices, seemed to watch her back. Ava let herself savor a hint of excitement. Tomorrow she'd return to her busy schedule, but tonight, hope quietly settled around her. She wanted a real place in this city, not just a job, something rooted, intimate, and genuinely hers. Perhaps, she thought with a tentative smile, that journey was about to begin. A soft chime rang from Ava's phone the next morning, waking her earlier than usual. She peered at the screen with bleary eyes. It was a text from Chloe, brimming with exclamation points. "Good news, the blind date is on. This Saturday, 7 p.m., the Gilded Quill." "Dress up, girl." Ava's pulse quickened. The Gilded Quill was one of Philadelphia's most upscale restaurants, a swirl of crystal chandeliers, velvet drapes, and impeccable service. She'd once passed by, wide-eyed at the sleek interior and the hushed aura of wealth. This was a world far removed from her daily routine of community visits and historical site tours. Though the invitation felt daunting, curiosity and a lingering sense of loneliness nudged her forward. Her day began with the usual flurry of tasks, checking emails, confirming details for an upcoming neighborhood workshop, and mapping out potential outreach strategies. At the Philadelphia Heritage Collective, Ava was treasured for her initiative and dedication, but she still felt like the new girl in a swirling city of well-established professionals. The labyrinth of corridors, peppered with old photographs and references to city heritage, reminded her of how much she had yet to learn. It was in the office's small kitchenette that Chloe's call caught her. "So, you saw my message?" her friend asked, voice brimming with excitement. Ava, heating up her second cup of coffee, tried to sound calm. "Yes, the Gilded Quill, huh? Seems extravagant." Chloe laughed. "Mark is a nice guy, stable job, never married, mid-30s, good sense of humor, and I already told him all about you." Ava cringed, imagining how Chloe might have exaggerated her strengths. "If I can help you break out of that shell, it's worth 1,000 fancy dinners," Chloe teased. While a rush of unease bloomed in Ava's chest, she realized part of her was intrigued. Blind dates had never been her style. She preferred organic connections, nurtured through shared interests and quiet conversations. Yet, wasn't that exactly what had led to a stale pattern of being alone? Perhaps venturing into something new might offer the spark she silently craved. Throughout the morning, Ava fought off daydreams of candlelit tables and potential awkward silences. At lunch, she ventured downstairs to a nearby cafe, seeking both a sandwich and a moment's respite. The hustle of the city sidewalks felt strangely reassuring today, as if Philadelphia itself whispered, "Take the leap." Balancing her tray, Ava slipped into a small booth and noticed James, a senior colleague with salt and pepper hair and a fatherly grin, already seated. He waved her over. "I've heard rumors you're going on a fancy date," he teased. Ava blushed, shooting Chloe, who stood in line for coffee, an accusatory glance. Clearly, the news was spreading. "Well, maybe," Ava replied, squirming a bit. James softened his smile. "Go for it. You've put in a lot of hours here. A night off, especially at the Gilded Quill, might be good for you." His unexpected encouragement tempered her anxiety. As Chloe joined them, the conversation pivoted to weekend plans, new developments in city preservation, and the excitement of possibly launching a volunteering program. Still, the date lingered at the back of Ava's mind. She pictured the glimmering decor, Mark's unknown face, and the potential for either a wonderful night or a mortifying disaster. When Ava finally returned to her desk, she reread the text from Chloe, and a small, determined smile formed on her lips. "This Saturday, 7 p.m., the message reminded her. Maybe she would surprise herself. After all, she wasn't the same guarded girl who had arrived weeks ago. She'd come here to shape communities and find meaningful connections. Embracing new experiences was part of that journey, wasn't it? As she settled into reviewing some documents for an upcoming outreach event, Ava let her excitement override her dread. The Gilded Quill, an upscale place for someone who still felt like a newcomer, might be the site of a much-needed breakthrough. All she had to do was show up, take a breath, and trust that, in a city brimming with possibilities, hope could still lead to something real. That evening, Ava slipped off her flats and sank onto her couch, scrolling absently through social media. Each post, happy couples posing in front of famous Philly landmarks, friends toasting at chic bars, only magnified her own uncertainty. She'd never been the type to throw herself into a blind date. But here she was, agreeing to meet a man she knew virtually nothing about, apart from his first name and Chloe's endorsement. An old, dull ache resurfaced, memories of a past relationship that had soured before it truly began. She caught a glimpse of an old photo buried deep in her phone, a younger Ava, bright-eyed, standing beside a man who seemed just as hopeful. That relationship ended when he moved for a career opportunity, and they simply drifted apart. Sometimes, though, Ava suspected it was her reluctance to fight for what she wanted that had sealed their fate. Could history repeat itself if she kept on hiding behind excuses? Determined not to wallow, she tapped Chloe's contact. Her friend answered almost immediately, eager as always. "Tell me you haven't backed out." Ava hesitated. "I'm not backing out," she said quietly, "but I'm terrified." A laugh came from the other side of the line. "Terrified is normal," Chloe reassured. "You deserve happiness, Ava. Don't overthink it." After the call, Ava padded into her bedroom, flicked on a small lamp, and opened her closet. Rows of practical blouses and pencil skirts for her work in community engagement met her gaze, mostly in neutral tones. She fingered a soft lilac blouse she hadn't worn in months. It was pretty, modest, yet flattering, a piece from a time she'd felt more open to stepping out of her comfort zone. Maybe wearing it would remind her to be brave. Still, the gnawing sense of inadequacy lingered. She tossed the blouse onto a chair and flopped onto her bed, letting out a sigh. Did she really belong in a glitzy restaurant like the Gilded Quill, making small talk with a stranger? She didn't want to experience another emotional letdown. And what if Mark was nothing like the easygoing, polite person Chloe claimed he was? The mere thought made her stomach twist in knots. In the flickering lamplight, Ava's mind drifted back to the sense of purpose she felt at work. Saving pieces of history, bridging communities, those felt tangible and meaningful. Dating felt more nebulous, rife with subjective measures like chemistry and fate. Smoothing out a misunderstanding over historical land usage was simpler than navigating the labyrinth of emotional vulnerability. And yet, she missed the warmth of companionship, the comforting thought that someone out there would share more than a fleeting moment. Maybe trusting Chloe's instincts was a step toward reclaiming that hope. After all, part of her move to Philly was about new beginnings. If she shut down every possibility, she'd never break free from her self-imposed isolation. A soft ping from her phone broke her reverie. A message from an unknown number read, "Hi, Ava. It's Mark. Looking forward to meeting you Saturday." It was friendly enough. She typed a polite reply, her heart drumming in her chest as she hit send. Now it was really happening. The date wasn't just an idea in Chloe's head. Before turning in for the night, Ava found herself scrolling through pictures of the Gilded Quill. Reviews raved about the refined ambiance, the exquisite dishes, the top-notch wine list. Everything seemed so glossy and perfect. She pictured herself perched on a velvet chair, feeling utterly out of place. Still, maybe the actual experience would be kinder than her swirling imagination. Pulling the covers around her, Ava closed her eyes and forced a slow breath. The memory of failed relationships tugged at her, but for once, she decided to push back. There was a future to shape in Philadelphia, a future that might just hold a genuine connection. If she didn't at least try, she would always wonder what might have been. Sunlight streamed into Ava's apartment the next morning, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. She hurried to get ready for work, her mind already buzzing about the upcoming weekend. Saturday loomed large, both a promise and a threat to her cautious heart. As she slipped on her shoes, she rehearsed how she might greet Mark. A confident handshake, a warm smile, something in between. By the time she reached the office, the sense of urgency from her daily responsibilities took over. A neighborhood council meeting was scheduled, and Ava had spent days preparing a presentation on reviving historic alleyways in Philly's Old City district. While others might find the topic dull, Ava saw it as a chance to help maintain the city's distinctive character. She thrived on bridging the gap between past and present, ensuring communities could appreciate their roots without hindering progress. During a brief lull, Chloe appeared at her cubicle with 2 steaming cups of coffee. "For the future Philly power couple," Chloe joked, extending one toward Ava. "How's the big preparation going?" Ava smirked, cradling the cup. "I think I'm more nervous about this date than any public speaking I've ever done." Her friend tossed her hair. "You'll do fine. Remember, confidence. And if he doesn't treat you right, you can always pretend you have an emergency and run." Ava managed a laugh, though her pulse still quickened at the thought of the gilded quill. She'd read it had a strict dress code. So after finishing some last-minute emailing, she ducked out to a nearby boutique during her lunch break. The shop smelled of lavender sachets and polished wood, and the racks were lined with dresses that seemed more suited for galas than community meetings. Letting out a small sigh, she started sifting through them, finally settling on a simple navy sheath that felt elegant without being ostentatious. Once back at her desk, she hesitated before peeking at her schedule. Saturday's date was circled in digital bold. She glanced around. Co-workers busily typed away, phone lines rang, and the hum of everyday routine filled the air. Ava wondered how many love stories, heartbreaks, and second chances played out beyond these cubicle walls. The thought felt oddly reassuring. She wasn't alone in feeling that precarious tug between professional ambition and personal longing. James, passing by, tapped her desk. "Make sure you leave on time tomorrow," he said gently. "You always work too late. It's Friday, go home, rest, and prepare for your big night." Ava blushed. Sometimes she felt like the entire office had a stake in her happiness, but it was touching, a reminder of how community could exist even in a busy workplace. Perhaps she'd found more than just a job in Philadelphia. She was forging connections on multiple fronts. The rest of the afternoon was a blur of planning reports and phone calls. Each time she paused for a sip of water, her mind flicked back to that date. She pictured the plush interior of the gilded quill, imagined Mark's face, currently a cipher, and tried not to let her insecurities overshadow the excitement. This was an invitation to step beyond her comfort zone. And for better or worse, she intended to follow through. Late in the day, Chloe leaned over the partition, whispering conspiratorially, "Don't overthink it, just remember to have fun, Ava." With a grateful nod, Ava pushed aside her anxieties. If nothing else, she could treat the evening as an adventure, a chance to see a swankier side of Philadelphia and test whether she could truly open up to someone new. When 5 o'clock rolled around, she gathered her things and slipped out of the office, the bustle of the city swirling around her like a comforting embrace. Tomorrow, she'd be stepping into unfamiliar territory, but maybe that was exactly where she needed to be. One last night to mentally prepare, and then she would dive headfirst into the unknown. Saturday arrived with a crisp autumn chill in the air. Ava spent the morning pacing her apartment, triple-checking her reflection in the mirror. The navy dress fit well enough, classy but not overdone. She'd even applied a subtle touch of makeup, accentuating her warm brown eyes. By late afternoon, her nerves had her skipping lunch, focusing instead on her phone's clock, its ticking minutes echoing her heartbeat. When she finally summoned a ride, the car wove through bustling streets, neon signs flickering in the growing dusk. Each traffic light felt like a countdown. By the time the driver pulled up to the Gilded Quill, Ava's palms were damp from clutching her small purse. She stepped out onto the sidewalk, where a doorman greeted her with a polite nod. Overhead, the restaurant's name gleamed in gilded letters, reflecting the streetlights. Inside, the space was lavishly adorned with gold accents, polished wood, and hushed conversations drifting through the softly lit dining area. A sharply dressed maitre d' approached, bowing his head. "Good evening. A reservation for Mark." Ava nodded, offering a tight smile, stomach in knots. He gestured for her to follow, weaving between tables occupied by couples in suits and evening gowns. Everything felt refined, and for a split second, she wondered if she'd walked into someone else's world entirely. The maitre d' stopped at an elegantly set table where a man in a tailored charcoal suit sat, reading something on his phone. His hair was dark, lightly streaked with silver at the temples. He looked up, momentarily startled, then rose to greet Ava with a polite smile. For a moment, her words caught in her throat. Hi, I'm Ava," she managed, thinking to confirm his name. The man paused, his expression shifting curiously. "Elijah Hart," he replied, a gentle trace of amusement in his voice. Ava blinked. Chloe had said Mark, not Elijah. Did she misunderstand? But before she could puzzle it out, he offered his hand. "I've been expecting you," he added smoothly, though something in his eyes suggested surprise. Unsure of what else to do, Ava slipped into the chair opposite him, her heartbeat hammering. Had the maitre d' gotten it wrong? This might be someone else entirely, yet he seemed oddly composed, and the table was set for two. For a moment, they exchanged pleasantries, each searching the other's face for clues. Ava carefully placed her purse on her lap, trying to recall Mark's description, mid-30s, a warm smile. Elijah, on the other hand, appeared a touch older, maybe late 30s, refined, with an air of quiet confidence. She swallowed, pushing down the urge to flee. Whoever he was expecting someone. Maybe he was Mark's colleague, or maybe Mark had used a middle name. "Shall we order some wine?" he offered, signaling the waiter. Caught in her own confusion, Ava found herself nodding. Perhaps Mark was just a nickname or an abbreviation. She decided to lean into the moment rather than make a scene. Something about Elijah's poised presence stirred both curiosity and intimidation in her. Conversation began with small talk, the ambiance, the city's unpredictable weather. Gradually, though, Ava's personality surfaced. She mentioned her work in community engagement, her interest in preserving local history. Elijah listened intently, occasionally guiding the chat with thoughtful questions. It felt unexpectedly natural. She stole a glance at his suit jacket, noticing an engraved silver cufflink with an H. Was that for Hart? She tried not to stare. An hour passed in a comfortable rhythm, each leaning forward when the other spoke. Ava's earlier nerves melted into genuine enjoyment. She found Elijah's composure strangely comforting, and he seemed drawn to her sincerity. At one point, she even made him laugh. A short, warm laugh that lit up his otherwise serious gaze. By the time dessert menus arrived, Ava realized she hadn't once checked her phone or wondered about Mark's absence. The evening held a peculiar magic, one she couldn't quite place. The strangest part was how right it all felt, even though she knew something was off. Still, as she caught Elijah's steady gaze from across the table, she couldn't bring herself to question it. Something told her this was just the beginning. Ava woke at dawn with mixed sensations swirling in her mind. The night before at the Gilded Quill had felt almost surreal, from the plush setting to the comfortable flow of conversation. But now, in the soft light of her apartment, reality pressed down on her. She fumbled for her phone, hoping for a cheerful text from the man who'd so unexpectedly captured her attention. Instead, she found a different message, one from Mark, the true blind date. "Hi, Ava. Hope I didn't confuse you last night. I was at the Gilded Quill but never saw you. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. Let's reschedule." Her pulse kicked into overdrive. She reread his words, feeling a rush of embarrassment at how easily she'd slipped into dinner with Elijah Hart, whoever he really was. She remembered how he'd confidently given his name, how he seemed to expect a totally different person for business, yet he'd gone along with her assumption, letting her believe he was Mark, at least for most of the evening. She couldn't decide if she was furious or intrigued. By the time she got ready for work, a dull headache had formed behind her temples. Her heart pounded each time she pictured Elijah's face, his polite smile, that flicker of amusement in his eyes. Part of her wanted to bury the memory under 10 layers of denial, but she could still feel the electricity of their conversation, how disarmingly at ease she'd felt with him. Mid-morning, she trudged into the Philadelphia Heritage Collective's airy office, half hoping her day would distract her from the fiasco. Instead, Chloe bounded over like an excited puppy. "Tell me everything. Was he handsome?" Ava lowered herself into a chair and confessed the mix-up. The entire story spilled out, the waiter's misdirection, Elijah's mysterious composure, and, of course, the belated text from Mark. Chloe's jaw dropped. "Wait, so you never actually met Mark? That means you had dinner with some random stranger?" Ava pressed her hands to her warm cheeks. "He wasn't a random stranger. I mean, yes, he was a stranger, but it felt, I don't know, familiar." The word sounded silly, but she couldn't deny that the man's calm assurance had drawn her in. Chloe tapped a pen against her notepad, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "So, you exchanged numbers?" Ava twisted her lips. "He took mine, said he'd return a bookmark I left in the check folder." She remembered the moment she'd reached into her purse and accidentally pulled out a handmade bookmark, one she'd crafted ages ago, then set it near the bill. Her cheeks burned anew at the recollection. "I forgot it on the table," she finished lamely. Chloe cocked her head. "Well, maybe it's for the best. You two clearly had some kind of connection, or else you'd have stormed off as soon as you realized the mistake." Ava pressed her lips together, recalling how she hadn't realized right away, but indeed, she could have left as soon as it became clear something was amiss. Instead, she'd stayed until dessert. Ava spent the rest of the morning immersed in project files, steeling herself against daydreams of Elijah's dark suit and understated confidence. She managed to bury the flurry of emotions until a soft commotion at the office's reception area startled her out of her concentration. Moments later, she looked up to see Elijah Hart in the hallway, holding her handmade bookmark with a polite smile. Every head turned. The staff recognized a figure of authority when they saw one, even if they didn't fully know who he was. Dressed in a tailored navy blazer, Elijah exuded the air of a man accustomed to commanding attention. Ava's stomach churned. Her feet felt rooted in place. Why was he here, of all places, when she could barely think straight about him? He approached her desk, pausing to glance around at the historical photos that lined the walls. Then, with a faint tilt of his head, he handed Ava the bookmark. "I believe you left this." His low voice carried a calm reassurance that both excited and unnerved her. She swallowed hard, unsure what to say, aware of her co-workers' curious stares. Their eyes locked. Ava felt the weight of all her questions. Why hadn't he said something sooner? And why had he let her believe he was her blind date? Yet, beyond the confusion rose an undeniable spark, one that made her pulse drum in her ears. Word of Elijah Hart's unexpected visit spread through the office like wildfire. By lunchtime, Ava couldn't walk down the hallway without someone whispering behind her. Though she tried to keep her head down, the awkwardness gnawed at her. She couldn't decipher Elijah's motives. Was he merely returning her bookmark, or was there more to his persistent interest? At noon, she sought refuge in a sandwich shop near the office. Chloe met her there, practically vibrating with anticipation. "Spill, did you talk to him? Did you set another date?" Ava took a measured bite of her turkey club, trying to stay composed. "We barely spoke. I thanked him, and he said something polite about wanting to see me again. He mentioned maybe grabbing coffee sometime. Then he left." Chloe leaned in. "See? This is a sign. He definitely wouldn't show up in person if he wasn't intrigued." Ava felt that same mix of excitement and trepidation. She couldn't help recalling how effortlessly they'd chatted the night before. Yet something nagged at her, the fact that he'd let her mistake him for Mark. That small deception weighed on her thoughts. She confided her worries to Chloe, who waved them away. "I get that it's odd he didn't come clean immediately, but maybe he was curious. People do weird things when they're trying to figure out if they like someone." Ava frowned. "Isn't that a red flag?" Chloe shrugged. "Trust your instincts. Just be careful, but also don't dismiss it before you see where it leads." They parted ways, and Ava returned to her desk, only to find James standing by her chair, arms folded. His expression was a mix of paternal concern and wariness. "So," he began softly, "that was Elijah Hart in our reception area." Ava nodded. "He's, someone I met accidentally. We had dinner." James inhaled. "I've heard of him. CEO of Heartstone Developments. Big name in real estate, ruthless in negotiations, from what I gather." Ava's stomach twisted. "I didn't realize until last night that he was, well, that important." James looked unconvinced. "Be cautious. People at his level often have their own agendas. I don't want to see you get hurt." He offered her a gentle pat on the shoulder before leaving, but his words echoed in her mind. Could Elijah be toying with her? Late in the afternoon, as the office buzzed with activity, Ava's phone chimed. Glancing at the screen, her heart skipped when she saw the caller ID. Elijah Hart. She stepped into a quiet corridor to answer. "Hello?" She tried to sound composed. His voice was both warm and measured. "Ava, I realize my appearance at your workplace was abrupt. I'd like to make it up to you. May I invite you to dinner?" A real dinner this time. Her gaze flicked over the office windows, the city skyline beyond. She remembered James's caution, but also Chloe's urging to stay open. Tamping down her nervousness, she nodded, then forced herself to speak. "All right, dinner, but I want to get one thing straight. You knew from the start I wasn't your intended meeting. Why keep silent?" A pause crackled over the line. "I'll explain when we meet," he said, his tone softer. "I promise." They agreed on the following evening at a restaurant on Rittenhouse Square, a place known for its quiet sophistication. Ava hung up, feeling her insides flutter. Chloe appeared moments later, reading the excitement on her face. "You're seeing him again," she squealed. Ava nodded, but her grin was laced with doubt. "I am. But James told me to watch out. Apparently, Elijah has a reputation in business circles." Chloe pursed her lips thoughtfully. "Look, you should keep your guard up, but nobody said you have to trust him blindly. Go, have dinner, hear his explanation, then decide if he deserves a second chance." With that, Chloe gave her a reassuring squeeze on the arm and headed back to her desk. Alone again, Ava sank into her office chair. Part of her dreaded the whirlwind she was diving into. Another part trembled with anticipation, remembering the comfortable rhythm of their last conversation. She could sense that Elijah Hart was a man of secrets and complexities, but for the first time in a long while, she felt an undeniable spark pushing her forward. The next evening, a chill wind swept the streets of Rittenhouse Square, carrying fallen leaves across the sidewalks. Ava arrived at the elegantly lit bistro a few minutes early, nerves coiling in her stomach. She'd chosen a simple yet flattering dress, more subdued than the one she wore at the Gilded Quill. As she stepped inside, warm lighting and the hum of quiet conversation enveloped her. A hostess guided her to a table near the window where Elijah was already seated. He stood, offering a faintly apologetic smile. "I'm glad you came." He gestured for her to sit, and she eased into a cushioned seat, taking in the ambient piano music and fragrant candles. Tonight, he wore a crisp black suit, no tie, exuding that same effortless elegance she'd noticed before. For a moment, they exchanged polite remarks about the weather and each other's day, each seeming to test the waters of familiarity. Eventually, Ava leaned forward. "So," she began, "I'm still waiting to hear your explanation about that mix-up. You never corrected me." "Why?" Elijah sighed softly. "Because, at first, I was simply caught off guard. You approached my table expecting someone else, and there was something unguarded and genuine in your eyes. I haven't seen that honesty in a long time. In my line of work, most interactions feel transactional." He paused, as though weighing every word. "I wanted a glimpse of what that natural conversation might be, free from expectations." Ava's heart gave a flutter at his confession. Part of her understood it, yet she also bristled. "But you basically let me walk into a deception." His gaze locked with hers, somber. "I know, that was unfair. When I realized how much you were sharing about yourself, I felt guilty, but I was also intrigued. I didn't want to break the moment." They ordered appetizers, and conversation flowed more easily afterward. Elijah asked about her background, the small town she grew up in, and how she ended up championing historical preservation. She explained how she believed that every corner of a city told a story worth protecting. In turn, he revealed snippets of his own path, studies in business, early successes, a relentless climb to the top. Yet behind his corporate polish, she sensed a faint loneliness, one he hid expertly. When the food arrived, rich scallops for Elijah, a pan-seared salmon dish for Ava, they discovered a surprising alignment of tastes. They shared the same liking for subtle, savory flavors, each praising the other's choice. After dinner, Elijah glanced at her with a small smile. "I'd like to show you something outside the typical upscale routine, if you're willing." Intrigued, Ava agreed, and they left the restaurant hand in hand, stepping into the brisk Philadelphia night. He led her a few blocks away to a neighborhood close to Rittenhouse Square, where the architecture shifted from gleaming high-rises to historic row houses. It was quieter here, the streets lit by vintage-style lamps. At a corner, they came upon a tiny gelato shop, a place Ava recognized from her office lunches. Elijah pushed open the glass door, offering her first pick among the rainbow of flavors displayed. A grin split Ava's face. She went for salted caramel, while Elijah chose pistachio. They wandered back onto the sidewalk, cups in hand, talking about everything and nothing. The contrast between the refined dinner and this simple dessert struck Ava deeply. Elijah, so poised and polished, seemed equally comfortable strolling through an unpretentious neighborhood. She began to see glimmers of genuine curiosity in him, a willingness to escape the narrow confines of luxury. Before they said goodnight, He walked her to a nearby train station so she could catch her ride home. Standing on the dimly lit platform, he brushed a stray hair from her cheek. "I know I complicated things by not admitting who I was right away. But I'd like to keep seeing you, if that's something you'd want too." Her breath caught at the gentleness in his voice. She nodded, her cheeks warming despite the chill. In that moment, everything felt wonderfully possible, as if there were worlds still to discover, both in the city and in each other. Over the next couple of weeks, Ava and Elijah settled into a tentative rhythm of discovery, each glimpse into the other's life illuminating both their shared passions and the stark differences between them. On one evening, Elijah took Ava to a lavish rooftop event organized by influential executives. Ava wore a borrowed cocktail dress, feeling slightly out of place amidst men in sharp suits and women in designer gowns. Yet Elijah remained close by, guiding her through small talk with fellow CEOs and finance gurus. Her initial anxiety melted when she realized how genuinely he included her in conversations, praising her work at the Philadelphia Heritage Collective. On a different weekend, Ava flipped the scenario by inviting him on a walking tour of Old City's colonial streets. She showed him charming buildings with plaques commemorating events from centuries before. Elijah listened intently, posing thoughtful questions about her preservation efforts. He even admitted he hadn't recognized how rich Philly's historical tapestry was until she highlighted the layers beneath the skyscrapers. But cracks began showing, subtle at first. Ava noticed Elijah's phone buzzing incessantly, especially during their quieter moments. She overheard occasional references to a major new development project, something big enough to consume the attention of his board members at Hearthstone Developments. Though he never deliberately hid these calls, neither did he elaborate on them. She felt a vague unease whenever business intruded, as though it might overshadow the personal space they were creating. One evening, after a casual dinner, they strolled near Independence Hall. The moonlight gave the historic building a serene aura, and Ava joked that she could practically hear the founding fathers whispering. Elijah offered a light chuckle, but she sensed his mind was somewhere else. At last, she mustered the courage to ask, "You seem distracted lately. Is everything okay?" He hesitated, slipping his hands into his coat pockets. "Work is intense right now. A new expansion we're planning. Not everyone agrees on the direction." Ava wanted to probe further, but his guarded tone hinted he wouldn't say much. She thought back to James's warnings and felt a twinge of worry. Still, she decided to trust that Elijah would share more when the time felt right. Meanwhile, in the office, James remained mildly skeptical of Elijah's intentions. He'd seen too many corporate types swoop into neighborhoods with promises of improvement, only to leave them stripped of their charm. Ava assured him that Elijah seemed different. He was respectful, even fascinated by her passion for community work. James stayed polite but watchful. Chloe, on the other hand, was delighted with every romantic detail Ava reported. "See? You two are bridging worlds," she'd exclaim. "It's like a fairy tale minus the illusions." Still, Ava occasionally caught herself wondering if the differences between them could be bridged. The vast resources and social circles at Elijah's fingertips made her own life feel comparatively modest. She worried she might bore him, or that eventually their separate realities would widen the gap. Then came the day she first heard about a rumor. A large real estate entity eyeing a significant plot of land near a community garden. Specifically, the Liberty Community Garden, a beloved green space the Philadelphia Heritage Collective hoped to protect. The rumor reached Ava in the form of hushed gossip during a staff meeting. Her heart sank at the possibility of a major corporation bulldozing one of the few communal havens left in an underserved neighborhood. Yet the name Hearthstone Developments didn't come up outright, and she tried to dismiss her uneasy feeling. Still, That night, she mentioned her concerns to Elijah in passing, carefully watching his face. He tensed, but shrugged. "There are always rumors in real estate. Let's wait for concrete information." Something about his dismissive tone pricked at her, but she told herself it was just business. She had no proof that his firm was involved. In the soft glow of city lights, they locked hands as usual, but Ava sensed an undercurrent of conflict creeping into the edges of their relationship, a subtle friction that might intensify if their professional worlds collided. For now, they pressed on, each privately hoping that blossoming affection could outweigh any looming challenges. A crisp Saturday ushered in the perfect excuse for an outdoor date. Ava proposed a casual picnic at Fairmount Park, and Elijah surprised her by readily agreeing. He arrived dressed simply in a cotton shirt and jeans, a far cry from his usual tailored attire. Seeing him so relaxed lifted Ava's spirits. It felt like a chance to step away from all the complexities, potential real estate conflicts, contrasting lifestyles, office gossip, and just enjoy each other's company. They found a quiet spot beneath a towering oak, where fallen leaves formed a gold and red carpet. The mid-autumn sun cast a gentle warmth, and the steady hum of families cycling by or couples walking dogs added a peaceful chorus. Ava laid out a checkered blanket and unpacked sandwiches, fruit salad, and homemade cookies. Elijah helped arrange the food, chuckling as he confessed he rarely ate outdoors unless it involved a catered corporate function. "I didn't realize how nice it could be to just sit on the grass," he said, leaning back on his elbows. The tension she'd sensed in him recently seemed to melt in the park's serene ambiance. As they ate, the conversation flowed effortlessly. They swapped childhood anecdotes. Ava recalled the time she tried to run a lemonade stand in her old neighborhood, while Elijah described his teenage ambition to become a musician before realizing he had zero talent. Each story revealed new facets, sparking more laughter than either expected. Eventually, the topic turned to Ava's ongoing projects. She mentioned the Liberty Community Garden again, explaining its vital role in providing fresh produce to residents who lacked easy access to grocery stores. It's also a communal space where neighbors share experiences, events, and cultural traditions, she added. "I'd hate to see that kind of resource vanish." He nodded thoughtfully. "You care so deeply about these places. Your devotion is admirable." She noticed a flicker in his gaze, maybe pride, maybe worry. For a moment, she wondered if he was about to disclose more about his business dealings. But he only reached for her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. They spent the afternoon strolling along tree-lined paths, occasionally stopping to watch squirrels dart around. The park seemed to envelop them in a calm bubble, free from the usual swirl of obligations. Elijah's face lit up at the simplest discoveries, a hidden pond, a family of ducks waddling by, or the faint sound of a saxophonist practicing near a distant statue. At one point, Ava felt a childish impulse to race him to the top of a small hill. He raised an eyebrow but accepted the challenge, chasing her with mock determination. When they both reached the crest, breathless and laughing, Ava noticed how his entire demeanor glowed. In that instant, it felt easy to believe they could surmount any looming difficulties. Being together was enough. They finally settled on a bench overlooking the Schuylkill River, bathed in late afternoon sunlight. Elijah draped an arm around her shoulders, and she leaned in, comforted by his warmth. For the first time in a while, Ava let herself imagine a future free of the stumbling blocks she feared. No corporate drama, no conflicts of interest, just steady companionship. She liked the idea of forging something real with him, something that transcended the superficial sparkle of big city success. They lingered until the light began to fade, the sky streaked with shades of pink and lavender. Before they parted ways, Elijah cupped her cheek and kissed her softly. The tenderness left Ava feeling lightheaded, as though the moment itself confirmed that they were on the right track. The day had been a sweet glimpse of what could be. Two people from different worlds finding solace in each other's presence. As Ava gathered the picnic leftovers and folded the blanket, she couldn't stop smiling. She and Elijah might still have hurdles ahead, especially if the rumors about the garden proved true, but that afternoon in Fairmount Park offered a promise. Maybe, just maybe, their bond would prove strong enough to handle whatever came next. Ava locked up her office late one afternoon, stepping onto the bustling Philadelphia sidewalk with a folder of notes pressed to her chest. These days, her thoughts swung between the high of her deepening relationship with Elijah and a gnawing sense of foreboding about the Liberty Community Garden. That afternoon, she had uncovered a document indicating that Heartstone Developments, Elijah's company, had at least considered acquiring land around the garden. No official transaction was recorded, yet the possibility weighed heavily on her. She hurried to meet Elijah for dinner at a small Italian restaurant near City Hall. Sliding into a booth across from him, she noted the worry lines creasing his forehead. Their usual easy banter was nowhere in sight. After the waiter poured water and left them to decide on entree, Elijah exhaled. "I'm sorry if I'm not great company tonight. Work is complicated." Ava nodded, her pulse fluttering. She wanted to confront him, but the right words wouldn't form. Instead, she said quietly, "If you ever need to talk about it, I'm here." He gave a half smile, but the tension in his posture remained. She found herself peering at him, searching for the man who'd once marveled at gelato and strolled with her under the trees in Fairmount Park. Throughout dinner, they danced around each other's worries. Elijah mentioned an upcoming meeting with his board members, who were pushing for an ambitious expansion. Ava listened, trying to glean details, but he spoke in vague terms. At one point, she nearly blurted out her suspicion that this expansion involved the garden she was fighting to save. Yet each time the impulse rose, she hesitated, unsure if she was prepared for the answer. Later, over coffee, the mood softened enough that Ava dared to share a bit of her own fears. "There's a project I've been focusing on," she explained. "A community garden in a disadvantaged neighborhood. The collective wants to protect it, but rumors say a large developer aims to purchase the land. It would devastate the residents, and me." She observed Elijah's reaction carefully. His expression grew guarded. He nodded, sipping his coffee. "Rumors can be misleading," he said. "Sometimes deals are only in the exploratory phase. Nothing's final." Though his tone was measured, she sensed something beneath it, an uneasy flicker. Did he already know precisely what was happening? When they emerged onto the sidewalk, streetlights had begun their nightly glow. A crisp breeze rustled Ava's hair as they walked in silence. She finally mustered the courage to ask, "Elijah, if the expansion your company is planning ever collided with my work, could we talk about it openly?" Her voice trembled slightly. He paused, the neon lights of a nearby sign reflecting in his dark eyes. "I would never deliberately hurt something you care about," he said, lifting her hand. "But I can't always control my board's decisions, especially once momentum starts." His careful choice of words sent a chill through her. Was he confirming the worst? That night, she returned home feeling the strain of trying to safeguard a fragile connection that might be at odds with her professional mission. Her new apartment, still partially filled with half-unpacked boxes, felt colder than ever. She sank onto the couch, hugging a throw pillow to her chest, mind whirling with conflicting loyalties. Elijah's protectiveness toward her was genuine. Yet how far would it extend if his own empire stood to gain from removing the garden? In bed, sleep eluded her. Memories flickered, laughing under the autumn sun in Fairmount Park, strolling through colonial streets, feeling the warmth of his arm around her shoulders. She wanted to trust that the man who quietly admired her convictions wouldn't betray them. But the world of high finance and swift deals was a place she barely understood. And deep down, she worried that once business interests took hold, emotions might become secondary. By morning, she resolved to act. If there was even a chance that Heartstone Developments was behind this threat, she needed proof. She couldn't just stand by, waiting. She would gather facts, lean on her colleagues, and prepare for battle if necessary. Because her dedication to community wasn't a hobby, it was who she was. And if that meant clashing with the man she was falling for, then so be it. Ava stepped briskly into the Liberty Community Garden one cool Saturday morning. The scene before her never failed to lift her spirits. Rows of vegetables tended by dedicated neighbors, trellises of climbing beans, and small plots bursting with marigolds. But the mood today felt somber. Word had spread that an unnamed developer was circling the property, prompting anxious whispers and a flurry of "Save the Garden" signs posted around the chain-link fence. At the far end of a row of tomato plants, an older woman named Gladys knelt, turning over soil. She rose stiffly as Ava approached. "We heard rumors," Gladys said, voice trembling with worry. "Folks say a big company wants to bulldoze everything for a commercial site. This garden's our lifeline. We don't have grocery stores close by. Where would we go for fresh produce?" Ava placed a reassuring hand on Gladys's shoulder. "I'm determined to protect this place," she replied softly. "We'll fight it if it comes to that." "I promise." Despite her own uncertainty, she recognized that her role at the Philadelphia Heritage Collective gave her a platform. She intended to use it. Back at her office, Ava convened a last-minute meeting with Chloe, James, and two other colleagues. They pored over maps and property deeds, searching for any clue that might link the rumored acquisition to a specific firm. James, pushing his reading glasses higher on his nose, found a recent memorandum indicating Project Horizon had flagged the garden's location as prime development territory. Although the documents didn't outright name Heartstone, the puzzle pieces in Ava's mind clicked into place. Her heart sank. Elijah had used the phrase expansion more than once. She pictured the polished boardrooms at Heartstone Developments, men in suits plotting out how to maximize profit. She swallowed hard, remembering how Elijah had flinched whenever she mentioned Liberty Community Garden. Was it guilt? Chloe, sensing Ava's distress, spoke up. "This is huge, Ava. We need a plan, media coverage, petitions, local council support. The more public the pushback, the harder it'll be for them to sweep in." She placed a comforting hand over Ava's. "We have your back." Ava spent the afternoon strategizing. She drafted press releases emphasizing the garden's social and historical value. The area, once a vacant lot, had been transformed by residents decades ago into a hub of community resilience. Photographs of potlucks, harvest days, and children's educational programs decorated her desk, each snapshot a testament to what the neighborhood stood to lose. By late evening, exhaustion tugged at her limbs, but she couldn't leave without calling Elijah. She had to hear his voice, maybe confirm her suspicions or glean some reassurance. He answered after several rings. She detected fatigue, or perhaps reluctance, in his greeting. "Is everything okay?" he asked quietly. She hesitated, then dived in. "I need to ask you directly. Are you or your board planning to acquire the land that houses Liberty Community Garden?" A pause thickened the air. "Ava, I'm not at liberty to disclose every move my company makes." His careful phrase made her chest tighten. "So it's true," she whispered. Silence fell again, an admission in itself. She inhaled, trying to steady her emotions. "That garden is vital. If Hearthstone demolishes it, you'll be hurting people who rely on it for more than just vegetables. It's a cultural space, a living piece of Philadelphia's community spirit. She could almost hear the battle raging in his mind. Finally, Elijah murmured, "I understand why you're upset, but these projects take shape long before someone like me can intervene. It's not always so simple." The careful distance in his words both pained and angered her. The man who appreciated her passion was also part of a machine that threatened to crush it. After the call ended, Ava stared at her phone, tears prickling the corners of her eyes. She felt betrayed, even though a part of her knew Elijah was caught in an impossible position. Still, the fact remained. The garden she adored stood in the path of his company's ambition, and she had no intention of letting it go down without a fight. The headline blazed across her phone screen on Monday morning like a bolt of lightning. She mistook the millionaire CEO for her blind date, and one simple night became impossible to forget. Ava's heart pounded as she scanned the blog post from a local gossip site specializing in high society scoops. The article recounted, complete with dramatic flair, how Ava had sat down at Elijah Hart's table by mistake at the Gilded Quill, thinking he was her blind date. It highlighted details only a few friends might know: her job as a community coordinator, the swirl of speculation around their romantic involvement, and the suspicion that the fateful night had led to a behind-the-scenes corporate scandal. A wave of heat flooded her cheeks. She stood frozen in the middle of the office corridor, co-workers bustling past. Who had leaked these details? Chloe wouldn't do this, nor would James. A tiny, cynical voice in her mind suggested it might be someone from Elijah's orbit, maybe an underling with access to his schedule. Regardless, the damage was done. With a trembling hand, Ava tapped open the comments section. As expected, it was a maelstrom of speculation. Some called it a fairy tale romance. Others, an opportunistic move by a nobody trying to climb social ranks. Ava's eyes burned. She'd guarded her privacy, never seeking attention. Now every vulnerability was on display. She ducked into a quiet conference room and dialed Elijah. He picked up on the second ring, sounding breathless. "I saw it," he said. "Someone forwarded the link. Ava, I'm sorry this is happening." His tone was thick with frustration. "I suspect a board member or a rival might have fed them details to undermine my credibility. A scandal, even a personal one, can sway investor confidence." Her chest tightened. "And me?" she asked, voice shaking. "I'm left looking like some starry-eyed fool who barged into your world. This isn't just about your investors, it's my reputation too." Ava recalled Mark's confusion, her own embarrassing first dinner, and the knowledge that she'd genuinely fallen for Elijah in those moments. Now it was fodder for gossip. Throughout the day, she attempted to focus on her real work, preparations for a public hearing regarding the Liberty Community Garden. The Philadelphia Heritage Collective planned to speak on behalf of the community, rallying neighbors to attend and voice support. But the stares and whispers from colleagues who had clearly read the sensational article grated on Ava. She overheard someone chuckling in the break room, murmuring, "Poor thing," thinking she could hold on to a billionaire's attention. By mid-afternoon, Miss Albright, Elijah's poised assistant, unexpectedly appeared at the reception desk, requesting to see Ava. Unsure what to expect, Ava led her into an empty conference room. The assistant's expression was brisk, but not unkind. "Mr. Hart asked me to deliver this." She handed Ava a manila envelope. "He regrets that he can't come himself due to urgent meetings. He hopes you'll trust him despite the unfortunate gossip swirling around." Inside the envelope was a short letter. Elijah had handwritten a note acknowledging how humiliating the press coverage must feel. He assured her that he was working to locate the leak and handle the fallout. He also confirmed that the pending land deal was indeed on the Hearthstone board's docket, but that he was advocating for a more community-conscious approach. The letter ended with, "I never wanted my world to cause you harm. Please believe me." Tears pricked Ava's eyes. She hated feeling so exposed, so powerless to control her own narrative. The letter offered some comfort, but it didn't erase the fact that their relationship was suddenly a subject of city-wide speculation. Worse, it didn't solve the looming threat to the garden. She pressed the letter to her chest, wishing she could halt the machine that was devouring her privacy and endangering her life's work. Yet the damage was done. Outside, the office buzzed with talk about the upcoming hearing, the gossip blog, and the question of whether Elijah Hart would show his face publicly alongside Ava, or distance himself. By evening, as she boarded a bus heading home, Ava felt more certain than ever that a showdown was coming. The hearing for Liberty Community Garden was only days away. The rumor mill was spinning at full speed, and the article's humiliating portrayal of their first encounter, "She mistook the millionaire CEO for her blind date," echoed through her thoughts. She exhaled, gripping the seat's edge. Soon enough, everything would be laid bare. Elijah's loyalty to his firm, her fight to save the garden, and the question of whether their fragile bond could withstand this very public storm. Ava stared at the mirrored elevator doors in Elijah's condominium lobby, trying to calm the flutter in her stomach. They'd agreed to talk privately, away from nosy reporters and prying eyes. The scandalous blog post had become the city's latest hot topic. She'd even caught a snippet of morning radio chatter, debating if their fairy tale or farce romance would last. Each mention felt like a sting. When the elevator reached the top floor, she found him waiting at the entrance to his penthouse. He offered a guarded smile and ushered her in. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a sweeping view of the Philadelphia skyline, the lights sparkling like scattered diamonds. Still, the hush in the spacious living area felt thick with unspoken tension. They settled onto a sleek leather sofa. Ava clutched her purse, knuckles white. She decided to speak first. "I never meant for any of this to become public. I'm embarrassed and furious, honestly." Tears threatened to surface, but she blinked them back. "The article twisted everything. Now it's like I'm a gold digger who aimed for a billionaire CEO. And to top it off, the garden issue." Elijah reached for her hand. "I know. I hate seeing you under this microscope. I promise I'm doing everything I can to salvage the situation." She pulled away gently, not wanting to be consoled just yet. "What does that mean exactly? Will you stand up to your board, or are you just stalling?" That last question lingered, raw and direct. He sighed, propping his elbows on his knees. "The board is set on this expansion. They see the garden's land as key real estate. There's talk of commercial space or luxury apartments, something that offers huge returns. I've voiced my objections, but I'm one vote, and they can override me if enough members push for it." His eyes lifted to hers. "But I'm not giving up. I have a plan to propose an alternative design, one that integrates the garden." A spark of hope flared in Ava's chest, but her bruised trust wouldn't let it fully ignite. "What if they veto your design? Will you fight for it?" A hint of desperation laced her voice. She needed to know if she could rely on him to protect a place that meant everything to her and the community. He pressed his lips into a grim line. "I'll do whatever I can, though I can't promise an outcome." She nodded, her frustration mounting. The tension between wanting to believe in him and fearing betrayal weighed on her heart. She remembered how safe she'd felt in his arms. But now, the lines between ally and adversary blurred in ways she never imagined. Sensing her despair, Elijah leaned closer. "Ava, I care about you. I know this entire situation is overwhelming. Your privacy is compromised. Your professional passion is threatened. Let me in. We can figure this out together." His tone was gentle, but she heard the strain beneath it. She inhaled shakily. "I appreciate your words, but you have to understand. This isn't just a project for me. It's people's lives. You saw how that garden unites an entire community. If it's destroyed, we lose more than vegetables. We lose hope." Their eyes locked, both reflecting hurt and longing. Finally, Elijah broke the silence, voice low. "I hear you, and I'm not leaving you to face this alone. But we need time, Ava. Corporate wheels move slowly and with friction. If we rush or defy them outright, the board might dig in its heels." She wanted to trust him, wanted to find solace in his arms, and hope that they could weather this together. But the uncertainty of it all gnawed at her. She recalled the blog's exploitative headline, the judgments from strangers, the board's stealthy maneuvers. Every aspect felt like a thorn in a once blossoming romance. By the time she left his penthouse, neither had found a resolution. She walked out with an ache in her chest, aware that their bond was fraying under the weight of conflicting loyalties. In the elevator ride down, her tears finally came. She yearned for the sincerity of their early dates, back when the biggest challenge was simply figuring out who he was. Now, the stakes were so much higher, and the pain of possible betrayal cut deeper than she ever feared it could. Ava stood at the entrance of the Liberty Community Garden, a cruel wind whipping at her coat. A bright orange notice tacked to the gate read, "Proposed Development Hearing." The date was set for next week, a final review before permits might be issued. If the developers succeeded, bulldozers could roll in sooner than anyone anticipated. The sight made her chest tighten. As she paced the garden's perimeter, neighbors gathered, voices raised in alarm. Chloe arrived, breathless, waving the notice. "We need a press conference," she insisted. "We have to rally the community, show the city council this plan is unacceptable." James concurred, nodding gravely. "Time is running out." Desperation rattled Ava. She dialed Elijah's number, half hoping he'd say something reassuring, that he'd convinced the board to slow down, that the plan was on hold. But his line went to voicemail. Between the swirling rumors, the humiliating gossip, and now this sudden escalation, her faith in him began to crack. She recalled their last conversation, his promises, his pleas for patience. But to the people whose garden was threatened, patience wasn't enough. That afternoon, she left messages for local politicians, journalists, and any ally who might apply pressure. The day ended with her slumped at her desk in the Philadelphia Heritage Collective, scanning legal documents for a loophole or statute that could provide immediate protection. The phone vibrated around 8 in the evening. Elijah, at last. "Ava," came his weary greeting. "I heard about the notice. The board moved the timeline ahead." His voice held frustration, but also a strange resignation. "I wish I had better news, but I lost the preliminary vote. They're pushing forward aggressively." Pain lanced through her. "So that's it," she demanded, pressing the phone harder to her ear. "They're just going to plow over everything. Doesn't my stance matter to you?" Tears stung, but her tone hardened. Elijah hesitated. "I tried to sway them. I called for a delay, but the vote was decisive. I'm sorry, but it's not final until the permit is approved." Ava let out a bitter laugh. "And who's going to fight them if their own CEO isn't enough?" The line crackled with tension. She could almost feel his anguish, yet her anger refused to subside. Eventually, he spoke, voice low. "I have an alternative design ready to present at the official hearing. It's a compromise, but it could preserve most of the garden. Please believe me, I'm doing what I can." His appeal chipped away at her fury, but not enough. "I've heard these promises." Meanwhile, that notice is pinned on the gate for all to see. Silence followed, like a chasm opening between them. Finally, Ava inhaled unsteadily. "I need to do this on my own, Elijah. I appreciate your efforts, but I can't keep placing hope in half measures. My community deserves a champion who doesn't depend on backroom deals." Her heart pounded at the realization that she was effectively pushing him away. His response came quietly, bruised but resolute. "If that's what you want, I'll respect it, but I won't stop trying to fix this." They lingered on the line, unspoken apologies and unspoken accusations floating in the space between them. Then he whispered goodbye, and the call ended. Ava stared at the phone in her hand, the finality of that moment sinking in. They hadn't used the words break or end, but the message was clear. She couldn't fight this battle while clinging to a relationship that might be part of the very system threatening her cause. And Elijah, bound by corporate constraints, might not be able to meet her where she needed him most. She left the office feeling simultaneously defiant and hollow. On the train ride home, she gazed at her reflection in the dark window, wrestling with heartbreak. Memories of their peaceful park picnic, the silly gelato run, the mesmerizing city views from his penthouse, she wondered if all of it was slipping away. By the time she unlocked her apartment door, a hard resolve had formed. She wouldn't let heartbreak paralyze her. She'd pour every last ounce of energy into saving the garden and let fate decide if Elijah Hart could reconcile love with ruthless corporate ambition. For now, they were on separate paths, and the distance between them felt achingly real. A brittle wind swept through the early morning protest at the Liberty Community Garden. Ava clutched a clipboard tight against her chest as she rallied a gathering of neighbors around homemade signs: "Save our garden, community over profit, no demolition." Despite the group's determined spirit, a sense of weariness weighed on everyone. The hearing was only days away, and Heartstone developments appeared unstoppable. A local news crew had arrived to film the scene. Under the reporters' pointed questions, Ava tried to remain poised. She emphasized how crucial the garden was for families who relied on it for healthy produce, how it strengthened communal bonds. Yet, as the camera lens focused on her, she couldn't help wondering if her words might be drowned out by corporate influence. Faintly, she recalled Elijah's promise to do what he could, but after their painful conversation, she felt alone in this fight. By mid-afternoon, the protest waned, and Ava trudged back to her office to find emails piling up. Chloe, typically a source of positivity, seemed equally drained. "We've done everything we can, petitions, social media, phone calls," Chloe sighed. "It's not enough. The city council might approve the permits if Heartstone presents a convincing development plan." James stood nearby, arms folded. "Unless we find something compelling, some legal argument or public outcry that forces them to reconsider, we're looking at a losing battle." His worried gaze lingered on Ava, aware of her emotional turmoil. She forced a small nod. "We can't give up yet," she insisted, though her voice quivered. Late that evening, Ava left the office with a pounding headache and a heart running on pure exhaustion. Even the city's vibrant glow felt oppressive. As she cut through the nearly empty streets, her phone buzzed. A jolt of conflicted hope surged in her chest. Could it be Elijah? But the screen displayed an unknown number. She answered hesitantly, bracing for another reporter's intrusion. Instead, a woman's clear, warm voice came through. "Ms. Stewart, I'm calling from the Philadelphia Tribune. I've heard rumors about local residents banding together to protect the Liberty Community Garden. We'd like to run a piece highlighting your efforts." Relief washed over her. A major newspaper spotlight could galvanize community support. She scheduled an interview for the next morning, determined to seize any chance to save the garden. Yet, as she hung up, Ava's thoughts circled back to Elijah. She recalled the times they'd confided in each other about their dreams, how genuinely he'd listened to her stories. Now she questioned whether it had all been hollow comfort. No, she corrected herself. He did care. But caring doesn't always translate to action. The painful gap between love and loyalty felt wider than ever. Once home, she tried to draft notes for the Tribune interview. Pages of data, heartfelt anecdotes, and historic photos were spread across her table. But fatigue tugged at her eyes. Laying her pen down, she realized she hadn't eaten. Even the meager contents of her fridge, some leftover salad, a half-carton of eggs, did little to stimulate her appetite. At midnight, she sprawled on the living room rug, flipping through old photos on her phone. Scenes of children painting murals in the garden, an elderly couple tending flowers, a pop-up cooking class that once taught neighborhood teens how to prepare fresh meals. The sense of community radiating from each image brought tears to her eyes. She remembered the day she'd first stepped onto that soil, feeling the city's pulse in every plant. Now, a corporate machine threatened to eradicate that heartbeat. A soft buzz from her phone startled her. She glanced at the screen, no calls, but a late email. It was from an old city archivist she'd reached out to weeks ago. The subject line read, Possible land preservation document, found something. Her heart kicked. Maybe, just maybe, there was a glimmer of hope buried in some dusty municipal file. Clutching the phone, she wiped her eyes, inhaling a shaky breath. Tomorrow would be another battle, but this clue could be the break they desperately needed. Before dawn, Ava woke with renewed purpose, the archivist's brief email echoing in her mind. She'd hardly slept. The message claimed there was a forgotten land easement or protective clause that might preserve Liberty Community Garden. Eager to verify it, Ava hurried to the municipal archives, a grand, aging building with ivy creeping across its stone facade. Inside, rows of filing cabinets and towering shelves greeted her. Dust motes danced in slanted beams of early sun. A bespectacled clerk directed her to a back room where the archivist, Miss Romero, waited with an assortment of aged documents. "You were asking about any legal anomalies or historical designations, right?" Miss Romero said in a gentle tone. "I can't guarantee a miracle, but I uncovered a half-century-old neighborhood revitalization record." Ava's heart thumped as she peered at yellowed pages. According to the typed script, the community had won partial protection for the plot decades earlier, granting it a semi-public use status, intended to shield it from commercial takeover unless strict conditions were met. The text was dense, peppered with legal jargon, but the gist was clear. The city recognized the land's communal value. If the site still fulfilled its original purpose, it might remain off-limits for private development without thorough public review. Buoyed by excitement, Ava snapped photos of the record and hurried to print copies. This wasn't an absolute barrier. Companies often found loopholes, but it could strengthen the legal argument at the upcoming hearing. After profusely thanking Miss Romero, Ava rushed back to the Philadelphia Heritage Collective. In the conference room, Chloe and James listened intently as she explained the discovery. Their solemn expressions lifted for the first time in days. "This could change everything," James murmured, carefully examining the photocopies. "If the city granted that protective status, Hearthstone must address it in their proposal. Ignoring it would violate municipal ordinances." Chloe grinned, throwing her arms around Ava. "You did it! You found the thread we needed." Still, Ava tempered her enthusiasm. "We can't treat this as a guaranteed victory. We'll need to present it convincingly at the hearing and rally public support." Her gaze flicked to the silent phone on the table. Part of her longed to share this breakthrough with Elijah, but she hesitated. Their last talk had been so tense, and she feared re-entering the emotional minefield. Focus on the garden first, she reminded herself. Within hours, Ava arranged an emergency meeting with community leaders and a pro bono lawyer who specialized in land use cases. Together, they planned to file an immediate injunction if the city council disregarded this document. Meanwhile, Chloe organized a media blitz, using the newly uncovered record to draw attention. Soon, local news outlets buzzed with headlines like "Forgotten Law May Save Garden" and "Community Finds Potential Legal Shield Against Major Developer." During these frenzied preparations, Ava was surprised by a text from Elijah's personal number. "We should talk. There's a formal board review tomorrow, and I have a proposal to integrate the garden. I'd like your input." She stared at her phone, torn. The last thing she wanted was to appear reliant on him, especially after insisting she'd fight alone. But a part of her wondered if a united front might help. Would he truly advocate for the garden, or was this another stall tactic? After a moment's deliberation, she typed back, "I have new evidence that might stop the demolition. Let's meet at the garden at 6. If Elijah was sincere, she wanted to show him the land and explain its living history in person. If not, she'd at least confirm his intentions face to face. By day's end, exhaustion gnawed at her, but a spark of hope guided her every move. That ancient piece of paper signified more than just legal protection. It represented the fight and determination of a past generation that refused to let their neighborhood be stripped away. Now Ava and her community carried that same torch. One last push, one final attempt to honor the love people poured into this soil. The next day dawned with electric tension buzzing through the city. It was the official hearing before the city council to determine whether Hearthstone Developments could proceed with its planned expansion, or whether Liberty Community Garden would stand under municipal protection. Ava arrived early at the ornate City Hall building, arms laden with folders, photographs, and copies of that crucial historical document. A hush fell over the chamber as officials, community members, and curious onlookers took their seats. Ava's heart pounded when she spotted Elijah among Hearthstone's delegation. He looked composed but pale. Their eyes met in a fleeting glance that conveyed both longing and unspoken worry. She drew in a steadying breath, reminding herself that she was here to defend the garden, no matter what happened between them personally. First to speak were Hearthstone's representatives, a polished lawyer spouting economic benefits, job creation statistics, and talk of modern revitalization. The council members nodded along, some asking technical questions. Then Elijah stepped up, cool confidence radiating from his stance. Ava's hand shook as she gripped her folder. This was the moment of truth. She expected him to repeat the corporate script, but instead he began with a disarming acknowledgement. "I won't pretend this development is without controversy," he said, scanning the room. "My board and I have debated this project extensively. However, I believe there's a path forward that respects the Liberty Community Garden's historical and communal importance." From there, he unveiled revised architectural sketches, explaining how the new design would incorporate the garden into a green courtyard and local produce space. A wave of murmurs ran through the spectators. Several council members leaned forward with renewed interest. As Elijah spoke, Ava felt her throat tighten. This was clearly his alternative design in action. He seemed genuinely determined to protect the garden. She glimpsed something unguarded in his eyes, a sincerity that reached well beyond corporate posturing. But she also noticed the stony faces of certain Hearthstone executives behind him. They looked displeased, whispering among themselves. Once Elijah finished, the council called for public comment. Ava rose and moved to the microphone. She introduced herself, voice trembling at first. Determinedly, she plunged ahead, recounting the garden's significance. She held up photos of kids tending seedlings, the elderly reaping tomatoes, community potlucks that crossed cultural barriers. Then she produced the newly found legal document explaining its origin and possible implications. "This site isn't just empty land," Ava declared, scanning the faces of each council member. "It's an ongoing legacy, recognized by our city's own policies decades ago. If you permit this demolition, you disregard that history and deprive neighbors of a critical resource." Her voice steadied, fueled by conviction. "Yet I'm not here to reject progress. We welcome thoughtful development, one that collaborates with residents, not erases them." She gestured toward Elijah. "Hearthstone's CEO has presented a new plan. If it genuinely upholds the spirit of the garden, we'd be open to dialogue, but we cannot support any proposal that bulldozes a crucial piece of this community's soul." Silence followed her impassioned words. Ava's pulse roared in her ears. Elijah watched her with an intensity she had rarely seen, while the council members exchanged murmurs. Finally, the committee chair spoke. "Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Stewart. We'll take this revised plan and the historic document into serious consideration." After a round of further comments from both sides, the council announced it needed time to review the updated materials. A verdict would come within days. With that, the hearing adjourned. Ava's shoulders sagged in relief and apprehension. As the crowd dispersed, she found herself face to face with Elijah. His usual corporate polish appeared frayed around the edges, replaced by a raw vulnerability. "That was courageous," he said softly. "I'm grateful you let everyone see what the garden truly means." She inhaled shakily. "I wasn't expecting your speech. I thought you'd toe the line with your board." He gave a fleeting half-smile. "I almost did. But you've shown me a different way, one that's about more than just profit." Looking past his shoulder, she noticed scowling executives from Hearthstone shaking their heads. "They won't take this lightly," she murmured. He nodded, resigned. "I know, but some things are worth risking that fury for." His gaze flicked to her. She swallowed, uncertain how to respond. Their personal relationship remained tangled in confusion and pain, yet for one shining moment they stood on the same side, united by a shared goal, saving the garden that meant so much to her, and, perhaps now, to him as well. Shortly after the hearing, an overcast sky draped Philadelphia in a gray hush. Ava paced outside the municipal building, scrolling through texts from anxious neighbors. The council's final decision could drop any day now. Though Elijah's revised plan had offered hope, public fear lingered. What if the city approved the original, harsher proposal? Suddenly, the heavy doors swung open, and Elijah stepped out, scanning the sidewalk until his eyes landed on her. He approached with cautious steps, like he wasn't sure of his welcome. "I have a few minutes before my next meeting," he said softly. "Could we talk?" She almost refused, still nursing the sting of their earlier rift. But something in his weary expression tugged at her. Nodding, she led him to a nearby plaza with a row of benches beneath barren trees. They sat side by side, the winter chill seeping into their bones. For a moment, no one spoke, as if neither dared disturb the fragile calm. Finally, Elijah spoke, staring at the ground. "I know I've put you through hell. First with the misunderstanding at the Gilded Quill, then with the secrecy around the garden. I wish I had fought harder, sooner." He paused, breath curling in the cold air. "When my board pressured me, I tried to please both sides, keep my job secure and hold on to you. But I see now that was impossible unless I truly stood up for what I believed in." Ava's heart squeezed with conflicting emotions: anger, relief, longing. The swirl of news coverage about their relationship, the humiliating gossip, and the heartbreak still stung. Yet she recalled his unwavering voice at the hearing, the revised design that prioritized preservation. "I was furious," she admitted, turning to him. "You spoke about compromise, but I feared it was just another tactic. Then you showed up at the hearing and took a real stand." He exhaled. "My board is furious. There could be repercussions." She studied him, seeing the fatigue etched into his features, the vulnerability. "What about you?" she asked gently. "Are you all right?" His lips curved into a subdued smile. "It's strange. I feel more at peace than I have in years. Speaking the truth, instead of dancing around profit margins, was liberating." He hesitated, lifting his gaze to meet hers. "And I realized I can't lose you. Not like this. I know I've asked for trust when I've given you reasons to doubt me. But I'm here, and I want to earn back whatever faith you once had in me." Tears blurred Ava's vision. She remembered the sensation of his warmth at Fairmount Park, how they'd laughed over silly jokes. They had a connection that felt simultaneously powerful and fragile. "I still have nightmares that the garden will be bulldozed. But I heard you speak that day, Elijah," she whispered. "You meant every word, didn't you?" He nodded, covering her hand with his. "I did. I've asked the board to let me rework the entire project so the garden remains intact, or at least largely preserved. Some members are open to it, especially with the public pressure and that historic clause you presented." Ava managed a watery smile. "And if they refuse?" A resolute glint appeared in his eyes. "Then I'll keep fighting, even if it costs me. This place, these people, you are worth the trouble." A swirl of emotions coursed through her: gratitude, love, fear, and something like relief. She squeezed his hand, letting him see the softness in her gaze. They talked for another hour, their words weaving apologies, confessions, and renewed hopes. In that small plaza, with the sky threatening drizzle, they found a cautious reconciliation. The hurt wouldn't vanish instantly, but they'd taken a step closer to each other, fortified by honesty. When they finally rose to leave, Elijah brushed a tender kiss against her forehead. "I'll keep you updated on the board's decisions," he said. "In the meantime, let me know how I can help with the community outreach. We're in this together now." For the first time in a while, Ava believed him. Walking away side by side, she felt a seed of optimism sprout within her. Even if storms still raged, they had chosen to face them hand in hand. Sunlight broke through persistent clouds the following week, shining down on a remarkable transformation at Heartstone Developments. Word had spread that Elijah Hart insisted on a major redesign for the contested expansion. Where once his board argued for maximizing commercial footprints, they now debated how best to integrate green space into the project. Some investors grumbled, but others, impressed by the positive public response, pushed for a compromise that could generate goodwill and new partnerships. Meanwhile, at the Liberty Community Garden, Ava and her colleagues felt an undercurrent of cautious hope. With the final city council vote imminent, they continued to gather endorsements, arrange volunteer events, and highlight the garden's social impact. Even local schools took interest, scheduling field trips to learn about urban agriculture. The community vibe felt rejuvenated, despite lingering uncertainty. One crisp morning, Ava arrived at the garden to find Elijah already there, dressed more casually than she'd ever seen him: jeans, a sweater, and boots muddy from stepping between rows of kale. He was chatting with Gladys, who beamed up at him while showing off her row of newly planted onions. The sight jolted Ava's heart with unexpected warmth. It was one thing for him to talk about integration in a boardroom. It was another to see him forging genuine connections with the residents. He spotted her and waved her over. "Look who's teaching me to farm," he joked gently, pointing to Gladys's tools. The older woman smirked. "He's a quick study, dear. Don't let him fool you." Ava laughed, slipping into place beside him. She saw dirt smudged on his hands. No trace of the immaculate CEO persona, just a man eager to understand a world he once overlooked. After a while, Gladys returned to her gardening, leaving them alone near the fence. Elijah's phone chimed, but he silenced it without glancing at the screen. Instead, he turned to Ava. "I wanted to show up here, not just for appearances, but to truly see how it all works. Every day, this place astounds me, how it brings people together, fosters care, and cultivates a sense of belonging. We need more of that, not less." She nodded, feeling her chest swell with emotion. "Some of us have spent years fighting for that exact idea. Knowing you're championing it now, it matters." Her voice caught briefly, the stress of the past weeks mingling with relief. They walked through the rows, pausing by a small patch of herbs. Elijah knelt to breathe in the scent of fresh rosemary, prompting Ava to recall the first time she visited this garden. She'd felt hopeful, yet isolated in the city. Now, she stood next to a man who embodied everything she once found intimidating: money, influence, power, but who had learned to meet her gaze at ground level. He rose, brushing dirt off his knee. "The council votes tomorrow, and I'm presenting the new plan. We'll incorporate the garden as a permanent fixture of the community, with possible expansions for educational programs. I've made it clear that without these conditions, I withdraw my support entirely." Ava blinked, processing his words. She had braced for less definitive statements, more grey areas, but his tone was resolute. They spent the rest of the morning side by side, talking with volunteers and neighbors, making sure everyone understood what was at stake. Elijah's presence soothed lingering skepticism. After all, he was the one who once stood behind the original proposal. If he could change his stance, perhaps the rest of the corporate machine could shift too. By noon, as the winter sun climbed, the pair found a moment alone by the garden's front gate. Ava admired how the sunlight highlighted the faint lines of worry on Elijah's face. He, in turn, watched her with a gentle smile. "We're not fully out of the woods," he admitted, "but for the first time, I can envision a future where this place thrives alongside a reasonable development." Ava placed her hand over his. "That's all we ever wanted. A solution that respects both progress and people. If the council approves it, the entire city might see how corporate interests and community values don't have to clash." Her voice trembled with a mix of excitement and nerves. Elijah leaned in, dropping a soft kiss on her temple. "Let's make it happen together." For a moment, the bustling world around them fell silent. In that delicate peace, they both felt it. A renewed sense of purpose, a bond forged from conflict and compromise. Tomorrow's council vote would mark either victory or heartbreak, but they would face it hand in hand, ready to create a new tomorrow for everyone. On the morning of the city council's final vote, Ava could scarcely contain her jitters. She'd dressed in her best professional attire, hair pinned neatly, arms loaded with documents and heartfelt testimonials from the Liberty Community Gardens neighbors. Chloe and James followed her into City Hall, each lugging binders filled with signatures and supportive letters from local organizations. Their small group felt a collective tremor of expectation in the marble-floored corridors. Before the official session began, Ava peeked into the crowded hearing chamber. Reporters lined the edges, their camera lights glaring. Residents from the garden community filled row after row, some holding placards that read things like "Grow Hope, not condos." Seeing them stand tall gave her a rush of gratitude and a flash of worry. What if the council didn't side with them? Her gaze drifted in search of Elijah. For a tense moment, she didn't see him among his corporate colleagues. "He'll be here," Chloe murmured, placing a comforting hand on Ava's shoulder. James simply nodded. He put his name on that revised plan. He won't vanish now. Soon enough, the council members took their seats at the long, raised table. The chatter quieted to a tense hush. Before the formal proceedings began, the chair recognized that Heartstone Developments wished to present an updated statement. At that moment, Elijah stepped into view. Relief flooded Ava, though her heart still thudded nervously. He approached the microphone with a composed air, offering a polite greeting to the council. "Thank you for allowing us to amend our proposal. Over the last several weeks, my team and I have worked closely with members of the Philadelphia Heritage Collective and the Liberty Community Garden to design a project that preserves what makes this neighborhood so special. Today, we submit a plan that ensures the garden remains intact and is, in fact, enhanced with new support structures for education and local produce initiatives." Behind him, Ava glimpsed the stony faces of a few Heartstone executives. They seemed resigned, having lost the internal battle to keep the original plan. Elijah's voice carried a quiet determination. "We believe this approach balances development with essential community values, in line with the city's historic stance on this land." He concluded to a buzz of whispered applause and uncertain murmurs. Then it was Ava's turn. She stood at the microphone, knees slightly shaking. "I'd like to reiterate the garden's significance," she said, her voice strong despite her anxiety. "Over the past few weeks, our community has proven just how vital this space is. We thank Heartstone Developments for reconsidering its initial plan. If their revised blueprint truly protects the garden, we welcome the chance to partner in a thoughtful evolution of this area." When she finished, a ripple of agreement passed through the crowd. The council chair asked a few follow-up questions, clarifying design specifics, budget allocations, and timeline. Elijah and Ava answered in tandem, exchanging brief smiles between remarks. It felt surreal to be standing side by side at last. Their once clashing roles fused into a collaborative force. An hour of deliberation ensued. Council members sifted through documents, exchanged low-toned comments, and occasionally glanced at the public gallery. The tension in the room was suffocating. Ava twisted her hands in her lap, trying to read the council's subtle expressions. Elijah, seated a row behind her, placed a reassuring hand against her shoulder blade. She dared not look back, but the warmth of his touch steadied her. Finally, the chair cleared her throat. "After thorough review, we, the council, acknowledge the historical documentation and recognize the revised plan. We hereby approve the development with conditions that the Liberty Community Garden remains intact, managed under joint supervision of the community and Heartstone Developments. Specific guidelines will be outlined to protect the area's cultural and social value. Motion passes." Cheers erupted from the audience. Ava felt tears spring to her eyes as Chloe grabbed her arm, squealing in delight. James whooped, punching the air. From across the chamber, an elderly neighbor beamed, tears streaming down her cheeks. It took every ounce of restraint for Ava not to rush straight into Elijah's arms right then and there. Instead, they each acknowledged the council's decision with respectful bows of the head. But as soon as the session adjourned, Elijah made his way through the jubilant throng. He caught Ava's hand, pulling her into a tight embrace. And in that moment, in front of a swirl of cameras and cheering neighbors, her heart soared. After weeks of turmoil, they'd finally secured a future for the garden. And, though still fragile, a future for themselves as well. The days following the council's ruling felt almost dreamlike for Ava. Scenes that once seemed improbable now became her daily reality. In the morning, she juggled updates with her colleagues at the Philadelphia Heritage Collective, orchestrating volunteer schedules and finalizing expansion concepts for educational plots in the garden. In the afternoon, she often collaborated with architects from Hearthstone Developments, drafting practical designs that merged the new buildings with the verdant community space. Even more surreal was the ease with which Elijah moved between these worlds. One afternoon, he invited Ava to a Hearthstone-sponsored luncheon aimed at unveiling the updated project to local press. She arrived feeling uncertain. Memories of gossip headlines still stung, but she discovered a more receptive crowd. The new plan had won public praise, and many now hailed Elijah's leadership in bridging corporate and grassroots efforts. As she took a seat next to him at a table near the stage, Ms. Albright gave Ava a small, respectful nod. It wasn't a warm greeting exactly, but it carried the weight of approval. Ava wondered if the assistant recalled how unorthodox this entire journey had been. Yet she sensed Ms. Albright's grudging admiration. The CEO's vision had evolved, and the company's reputation had benefited. When Elijah rose to speak, the attendees' chatter hushed. He thanked city officials, the community, and even his own board for embracing a different perspective. "There was a time," he confessed, voice resonating through the sleek banquet hall, "when I prioritized profit over everything else. But partnering with Ava Stewart and the Philadelphia Heritage Collective taught me that true progress respects history and fosters inclusion. This development is a testament to that lesson." A ripple of applause swept the room. Ava's chest constricted with emotion. She could still hardly believe the man once known for ruthless deals was now championing collaborative, socially conscious ventures. She felt warmth flood her cheeks as eyes turned her way. But she lifted her chin, accepting the recognition with quiet gratitude. After the luncheon, the two slipped away to a nearby coffee shop, a small refuge from the corporate buzz. Seated at a corner table, Ava sipped her latte, relishing the lingering euphoria. "Did you ever imagine your board would approve a design that keeps so much green space?" she teased softly. Elijah laughed, the sound carrying genuine relief. "If you'd asked me a year ago, I would have said no. But this crisis opened my eyes. It's not just about negotiating deals. Sometimes it's about connecting on a human level." He reached across the table, lacing his fingers with hers. "And you helped me see that." A flutter of happiness lit Ava's heart. Just months ago, she'd been a lonely coordinator in a new city, uncertain about her future. Now she was part of something bigger, forging a model where corporate clout served communal well-being. "It feels good," she admitted, "to watch the community get excited, to envision these improvements without sacrificing their space. This is what I always wanted, real impact." They lingered there, discussing everything from the next steps in construction to the possibility of introducing horticulture classes for local kids. Then, as evening approached, Elijah offered her a ride home. Ava accepted, allowing herself to sink into the warmth of his car's leather seats, a gentle tension building in her chest. Their relationship was more public than ever now, no more sneaking around or dodging paparazzi. Yet with that openness came a sense of vulnerability. People still talked, some praising their partnership, others judging it. Before she got out, Elijah caught her wrist. "Stay with me for dinner," he asked softly. "No big event, no cameras, just us, cooking something simple." His dark eyes held a quiet plea, and Ava felt her resolve melting into affection. She thought of those early days when they stumbled into each other's lives by sheer accident. Through all the chaos, they'd arrived at this calm spot, "I'd love to," she whispered. And so, they drove off together, leaving behind the corporate scramble for a while. Their destination, a modest meal in Elijah's kitchen, where the noise of the outside world would fade. It was a reminder that sometimes the most powerful way to connect hearts and causes is to embrace the everyday moments, a gift that neither had imagined back when this journey began. 2 weeks passed, marked by remarkable calm and steady progress. In that time, Elijah invited Ava to meet his family at a small gathering, an occasion that left her nerves dancing in her stomach. She'd heard enough about his background to suspect they came from a very different world than hers. Still, Elijah insisted they might be formal, but they're good people. "I want them to know who changed my perspective on life." So, on a brisk Sunday, Ava found herself stepping up to the grand front porch of a stately home in the suburbs. The house overlooked sprawling gardens that looked meticulously maintained. Elijah squeezed her hand in reassurance, then led her inside. Soft classical music played in the foyer, and a housekeeper took their coats with a polite smile. They met Elijah's parents in a sunlit sitting room. His mother, elegant in a tailored blouse, greeted Ava with a gentle handshake. His father, quieter, nodded and asked if she liked tea. The formality weighed on Ava, but she forced herself to stand tall and smile. "Thank you for welcoming me," she offered politely, hoping she sounded natural. They made small talk about the weather and the upcoming holidays, until Elijah's mother eventually turned to Ava, eyes bright with curiosity. "We've heard quite a bit about your community work. The Liberty Garden affair was in the news, yes?" Ava nodded, bracing herself for skepticism or even outright disapproval. But the older woman merely poured tea into delicate porcelain cups and said, "I admit, I was surprised at Elijah's pivot, but now, seeing how determined you both were, I find it rather admirable." Elijah's father cleared his throat. "I built my fortune in real estate too, and I recall a time when philanthropic efforts seemed tangential to success. Perhaps we old dogs can learn new tricks." There was a flicker of good humor in his eyes. Ava felt some of her tension ease. They weren't grilling her, more like observing how she and Elijah interacted. She explained a bit about her job at the Philadelphia Heritage Collective, the passion she felt for preserving community spaces, and how she viewed it as a form of safeguarding people's stories. Surprisingly, both parents listened intently, asking gentle follow-up questions. Later, Elijah took Ava on a short tour of the sprawling backyard. The manicured lawns and carefully shaped hedges couldn't have been more different from the vibrant chaos of the Liberty Community Garden. Still, he led her to a small greenhouse near the property's edge. "I used to come in here sometimes," he said, pushing the glass door open. "My mother liked growing orchids, and I'd watch her patiently tend them. Funny how I never connected that curiosity to something bigger until I met you." Ava's gaze drifted to neat rows of exotic plants. "It's beautiful," she murmured. She let her fingers trace the glass of a terrarium. "I can see how it influenced you more than you realized." They exchanged a soft smile, the intimacy of their reflections weaving them closer. When they returned to the sitting room, dinner was announced. The family meal proceeded with minimal awkwardness, sprinkled with polite questions and Elijah's parents recalling humorous stories of his youth. Ava blushed at learning about his teenage attempts at sports he was woefully uncoordinated for, if his mother was to be believed. Gradually, the formal air warmed, and Ava felt genuine affection blooming in the space. By the time they left, stepping out into the crisp night, Ava exhaled a breath of relief. Elijah's parents had shown measured acceptance, and she sensed the seeds of true respect taking root. As they drove away, he laced his fingers through hers, gratitude evident in his smile. "Thank you for doing this," he said softly. "You handled everything so gracefully." Ava leaned her head against the seat, heart buoyed by more than just relief. She felt, for the first time, that she and Elijah had begun weaving their lives together beyond the garden fight, truly facing each other's origins and families. It wasn't a seamless merge of worlds, but it was an honest one, guided by the trust they'd painstakingly rebuilt. Winter in Philadelphia arrived in earnest. Chill winds rattled windows, and snow dusted the city streets, transforming familiar landmarks with a fresh gleam. At the Liberty Community Garden, volunteers worked to install simple greenhouse structures, funded partly by Hearthstone developments, partly by grassroots donations, enabling year-round cultivation of herbs and certain vegetables. Ava, wrapped in a thick coat, supervised the assembly while chatting with community residents about upcoming workshops. "Once we're set," she explained to a small group of teens, "you can learn how to grow produce in colder months. We might even host cooking demonstrations so you can see your harvest in action." Their excitement reminded her why she fought so hard in the first place. Elijah arrived an hour later, dressed for the weather but still managing a stylish coat and scarf. He conferred with one of the lead architects, discussing plans for a future playground area that would integrate into the overall development without encroaching on the garden. To see him conversing with locals and wearing a bright smile warmed Ava's heart. The once impossible collaboration now felt natural. A local reporter approached, pen and notepad ready, wanting updates on the ongoing project. Ava noticed how adeptly Elijah handled questions, praising the community's role and crediting the Philadelphia Heritage Collective for their vision. He insisted this new direction symbolized the company's shift towards socially responsible development. When asked if he missed the old ways, he gave a brief, thoughtful pause. "I wouldn't trade the satisfaction of this new path for any quick profit," he replied. Watching him, Ava felt a surge of pride. By dusk, a mild snow had begun falling, blanketing the garden in soft flakes. Ava and Elijah retreated to a nearby coffee shop for warmth and a well-deserved break. Over steaming mugs of cocoa, they shared observations of the day, how the teens lit up at the idea of greenhouse cultivation, how an elderly resident insisted on personally thanking Elijah for listening to their pleas. "I can't deny it's nice to hear gratitude rather than pitchfork-level protest," he joked, a roguish smile tugging at his lips. Ava giggled, recalling how the same residents once boycotted Hearthstone for threatening to demolish their beloved space. "You earned it," she said, sipping the rich cocoa. "You and your team stuck to the revised plan, even with pushback from certain investors." A flicker of tension crossed his eyes. "Some fights at the office haven't been easy, but the more positive press we get, the more those investors see we can be profitable and principled. They're grudgingly admitting it's a viable strategy." In the lull that followed, Elijah reached across the small table to grasp her hand. "You realize we've set a precedent for the city, right? Other developers are watching. If this works, maybe more companies will consider preserving green spaces." Ava smiled, heart fluttering with optimism. "That's the dream," she said softly. "And not just for Philly. I hope it sparks a broader conversation about balancing development with community well-being." They lingered there, the windows fogging with the contrast of cold air outside and warm conversation within. Eventually, Chloe messaged Ava, celebrating a new wave of donations following an article spotlighting the garden's transformation. Ava showed Elijah the text with a beaming face. The air felt charged with promise, each new step echoing the changes they'd ignited. When they finally ventured back into the snowy street, the sky was a deep navy. Elijah wrapped an arm around Ava's shoulders, drawing her close against the biting chill. Beneath the swirling flakes, they strolled in comfortable silence, reflecting on how far they'd come, from that fateful night of mistaken identity to forging a partnership that transcended both corporate ambition and personal insecurity. As they neared Ava's apartment, he paused, pressing a gentle kiss to her temple. "Tomorrow, we finalize the greenhouse funding plans," he murmured. "After that, maybe we deserve a tiny celebration." She leaned into him, cheeks flush despite the cold. "Let's do it," she said. "We've earned it, and it's only the beginning of what we can accomplish together." Exactly 1 year later, the gilded quill glimmered with soft amber lights against a wintry Philadelphia evening. Ava stood at the entrance, heart pounding with an almost nostalgic nervousness. She wore a deep green dress, reminiscent of the first time she dared to step into this restaurant, the memory of that night, accidentally mistaking Elijah for her blind date, still brought a flutter of incredulous laughter. How different her life had become since then. Elijah appeared beside her, dressed in a tailored navy suit, a playful smirk dancing on his lips. "Ready for our anniversary dinner?" he teased, offering his arm. She nodded, slipping her hand through the crook of his elbow. "I still can't believe it's been a year since our unconventional start." The maitre d', now a familiar face, ushered them to a cozy corner table. Quiet piano music floated through the space. With a faint smile, Elijah pulled out Ava's chair, settling across from her. "I remember how bewildered I was when you sat down that night," he mused, eyes sparkling. "But I also remember how something clicked, even though we were two strangers who had no business talking to each other." Ava flushed at the fond recollection. "I still cringe at how sure I was that you were Mark," she admitted, fingers toying with her wineglass stem. "Though, to be fair, you didn't exactly correct me." They ordered dinner, lapsing into comfortable banter about the year's highlights: the frantic battle to save the Liberty Community Garden, the hearings, the media frenzy, and the slow but steady transformation of Heartstone Development's approach to community engagement. Ava noted how surreal it was that the man once caricatured as a ruthless millionaire CEO was now hailed for championing sustainable urban spaces. "It's like I stepped into an alternate timeline," she joked, prompting him to chuckle. When dessert menus arrived, he insisted she try the same mousse she'd unwittingly shared with him a year ago. Elijah reached into his pocket. Ava's heart skipped as she wondered if this might be some grand gesture, but all he produced was a well-worn bookmark, the handmade piece she'd accidentally left behind that first evening. The edges were slightly frayed. The ink design faded. "I wanted to give this back properly," he said, voice hushed. "It caused all kinds of confusion that night, but it also brought us together. I've kept it with me since then, a reminder of how life can change in an instant." Ava's eyes misted. She traced a finger over the little doodles she once sketched, tiny flowers and vines. "You held on to it?" He nodded. "I figured it represented the moment I decided to go off script. The moment I thought, maybe this beautiful stranger has something to teach me." Sniffling softly, she accepted the bookmark, tucking it into her purse with careful reverence. They shared a silent exchange of gratitude. Gratitude for the garden, for the city, for the sheer improbability that their worlds could collide and forge something so real. They lingered over dessert, occasionally brushing hands across the table. Afterward, as they stepped outside, the crisp air filled their lungs. Snow flurries sparkled under streetlights, reminding Ava of how she'd once stood here, uncertain and hopeful. Now she felt only a serene contentment. Elijah slipped an arm around her waist, pulling her close. "How about we walk by the Liberty Community Garden?" he suggested. "It's not far, and I hear the holiday lights are up." She agreed enthusiastically. They strolled through the city blocks, reminiscing about the countless hurdles they'd overcome. At last, they reached the garden, now enclosed by a festively lit fence and a small sign honoring its community champions. Inside, raised beds lay dormant under blankets of snow, but handmade lanterns glowed along the pathways, symbolizing resilience even in winter's grip. Ava hooked her arm with Elijah's, exhaling a cloud of frosty breath. "It's so peaceful," she whispered, recalling summer days of blossoming tomatoes and children laughing. He turned to her, his breath mingling with hers in the cold night air. "This place exists because of your courage and your refusal to accept that we couldn't do better," he murmured, eyes brimming with quiet affection. "Thank you for believing in me and in us." Tears warmed her cheeks. She pressed close, savoring the silent wonder of the snow-covered beds, the gentle glow of lanterns, and the man who had once been an impossible stranger. In the stillness of that winter night, they found a new equilibrium, one rooted in the city they loved, the garden they saved, and the destiny they built together from a single, unforgettable mistake. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.